Hello everyone and welcome to Quality Old Games. Today we are making another tier list, namely that of tier 4 units in Rome Total War. And this tier list is made in the campaign setting, so the rank or tier doesn't depend only on the unit fighting capabilities, but also the unit cost, training time, other requirements, and the faction's overall unit roster and situation affects the evaluation in addition to those fighting capabilities. So, without further ado, let's begin with Cavalry. First we have Camel Archers. And, well, of course, Missile Cavalry is always nice, but Camel Archers are not able to outrun enemy cavalry. And since cavalry is one of the main counters for missile or missile cavalry, so these guys are kind of vulnerable to their counter, and because of that I think they are only decent. Mainly because of the slow speed. Of course the camels can frighten the cavalry a bit, but since this is a missile cavalry, I don't think that frightening effect is quite enough. Then we have Cappadocian Cavalry, heavily armored Pontic Cavalry. Well, I think it's rather decent, but it is lacking in the secondary weapon department. So, yeah, it can tie enemy in place, it can win quite a few other cavalry units, but it's not quite on the tippity top of the cavalry units. It lacks some punching power, and because of that I think they are on the lower end of wannabe Spartans. Then on the other hand we have Cataphracts, which are also heavily armored cavalry unit, but what they bring into the battle is their secondary weapon, armor-piercing maces. And for instance, if Cataphracts go one-on-one on Cappadocian Cavalry, it is very clear that Cataphracts will win, and there is quite a few men remaining, so the unit won't become at all useless, but can be used for great effect for flanking maneuvers or rear attacks or something like that. So clearly this unit goes to this Spartan tier. Then we have Legionary Cavalry. I think it suffers a bit from the same as the Cappadocian Cavalry. It's rather good. Of course it takes 2 turns to train, which is not nice. And then again, some other elite cavalry unit takes that 2 turns as well, but yeah, I think these guys are also wannabe Spartans. They are quite efficient in battle, surprisingly efficient considering that Rome was mainly relying on infantry, so perhaps not full historical accuracy here, but yeah, and of course you can get them only after Marian reform, so that lowers the score a bit. Then we have Macedonian Cavalry. Compared to this cavalry trio here, I think these are clearly inferior. Of course they are heavy cavalry, but I think they are at best medicore. Of course they beat light cavalry, but against other heavy cavalry they are quite often on the receiving end. So yeah, only decent in my opinion. Then we have Nile Cavalry. I think they suffer pretty much from the same as Macedonian Cavalry. To make things worse for Nile Cavalry is that Egypt has access to chariots and chariot archers, which are kind of cavalry units or missile cavalry units, and both of these are better than the Nile Cavalry, which kind of makes Nile Cavalry obsolete. So I think they actually go to bad tier. Perhaps there are some situations where kind of normal cavalry could be better than chariots. I don't know. Is there such a situation? Yeah, I think make chariots instead of Nile Cavalry. Then we have Incendiary Pigs. Kind of niche unit, can only be used to frighten elephants. They cannot even frighten Scythed chariots, which is another unit that can run amok, but I've tested this, they cannot frighten those chariots, so only against elephants. And since there are only, 3 factions that have access to elephants, and some other units such as spears, peltasts, other missile units, archers are quite capable of dealing with elephants, I don't think these guys are actually worth it. Perhaps in some cases, if the enemy is fielding a large army of elephants, then perhaps. But otherwise, I don't see any use for the incendiary picks. Actually, 1 unit of peasants can beat 20 of these, if I remember correctly, so they are completely useless in battle if they are not fighting against elephants. Of course, if enemy has 20 elephants, 1 unit of these can actually beat those 20 units of elephants or war elephants, unless of course they shoot these handlers before that. And then we have war elephants, and that's quite an upgrade compared to the normal elephants or the smaller elephants. And these guys are actually missile cavalry, but quite often you don't want to go into melee with these guys. So basically, in order to counter their missiles, you will need to have long-range archers or missile cavalry or something like that. Because these guys, they are rather vulnerable to phalanxes, they are vulnerable to spears to some degree, but if a player controls these, I think they are S tier. Perhaps not quite as good as cataphracts, but still S tier. Of course, they are quite expensive, take long time to train, and may run amok. So clearly there are weaknesses in them as well. But yeah, I think strong wannabe Spartans or Spartans. Then let's move to infantry units. Then we have first Bastanai. Okay, 2 hit points is nice. Otherwise, I think the unit is rather mediocre at best. And I'm not sure, since Thrace has access to phalanx pikemen, which are 1 tier lower unit, why you would want to recruit these. Of course, at times you want to use these to protect the phalanx flanks or something like that, or perhaps in siege battles or siege defenses. These units can be decent, but I mean, overall, since most of the battles happen in the open field, you don't actually need to do sieges that much. I think they are just plain bad. Perhaps they have broken, or at least the Bastanai mercenaries have broken several times too many when I have had them in campaigns, so perhaps I'm a bit biased towards them, but yeah, I think they are rather bad. Then we have bronze shields, kind of elite pike unit. And since pike units are rather good overall, I think these guys clearly deserve to be wannabe Spartans. Perhaps on the weaker end, I think all phalanx pikemen units or pike phalanx units are somewhat vulnerable to missiles, and they are a bit clumsy in larger battles, but overall I think they are really solid unit. They don't require too much micro, for instance, in the battle and so on. So wannabe Spartans, clearly. Then we have legionary cohorts. I think one of the best overall all-around unit in the game. The only minus is that if you are playing with Julii and fighting against the barbarians, you don't get enough training facilities to replenish these units on the northern front. So that's a bit of a minus, but overall I think that armor-piercing pillar throw, actually 2 of them, will be quite devastating in quite a few situations. They have good stamina, they don't need looking after too much, and they are rather easy to micro, so you can use them quite easily to, for instance, punch through one phalanx unit and then try to flank the other units. So punching through that one requires perhaps concentrating pillar from several units and then just hitting through. So I think they are... Let's put them in high wannabe Spartans tier. I don't think they are quite on par with other units over here. Then we have another legionary unit, this time Numidian legionaries. Well, their stats are pretty much on par with Principes. So for tier 4 unit, that's not quite good. Then again, Numidia is lacking in the infantry department and quite other departments besides, in my opinion. So I think for other factions, I think this unit would have been bad, but because Numidia needs it, it's decent. Perhaps Armenian legionaries would have been here on the bad, or perhaps in the lower end of decent tier here, but yeah, I think for Numidia, these units are decent enough. Then we have another elite spear unit or phalanx unit, Pharaoh's Guard, clearly inferior to Bronze Shields because they don't have a shield. So as a player, one of the best ways to take these units down is to bring some archers to the battle and let the archers whittle these guys down, because they are slow in the phalanx, and if they come out of the phalanx, your infantry can engage them quite nicely. So they are clearly suffering from the lack of the shield. In my opinion, the worst elite phalanx unit in the game. Then we have Boyne infantry. The unit is decent, first decent infantry unit actually that Carthage get, but it's tier 4 already, and other factions are fielding their elite phalanx units. So yeah, Carthage needs the unit, but it's clearly worse than the other spear units here. So I think only decent and clearly on the lower end of decent tier. Then we have Royal Pikemen, clearly A tier. They are the best elite phalanx pike unit in the battle. Well, perhaps armored hoplites, which of course are tier 3, could compete for the title of best phalanx unit. And let's see what the Spartans have to say for this. But yeah, overall I think wannabe Spartans clearly, and on the upper end of that tier. Then we have Silver Shields. They are pretty much similar to Bronze Shields. I think they might be a bit more expensive than the Bronze Shield. So pretty much on par with the Bronze Shields, but yeah, let's put them a bit lower over here. Then we have Spartan Hoplites. Well, they are really solid fighting unit, based on their fighting capabilities alone, clearly a Spartan tier, but well, perhaps a bit funnily, I think they only deserve a place only in the wannabe Spartans tier. And the reason for this is that you can recruit them only in 2 cities, Sparta and Syracuse. They take 2 turns to build or train, they are rather expensive, and Greek cities have armored hoplites. So, well, of course it's nice to have elite units that have punching power. Quite nice punching power for them, but yeah. I mean, I would take 2 units of armored hoplites over 1 unit of Spartan hoplites in campaign. And after that, I would have that almost 5,000 denarii left, because I don't need to upgrade the barracks for these guys. And of course, retraining them is rather difficult. So because of that, they are only wannabe Spartans, even though they're based on their fighting capabilities, they would be here on the top tier. Then the last infantry unit we have Tierlist, Primarian tier 4 unit, and what hurts this unit really much is that it is tier 4. And well, in infantry battle, I think Hastati tier 2 unit would win this unit, and I think swordsmen would win this unit. They have their uses versus cavalry, but this is rather perhaps a bit complicated, because now they are suffering from the fact that they are Primarian unit, and most of the cavalry units that Rome faces in the Primarian time are not actually on the high tier heavy cavalry units, such as cataphracts or something like that. So even worse units can deal with those cavalry units. So the Tierlist is kind of wasted versus cavalry, where it's supposed to be shining. And at the same time, it clearly underperforms against infantry. So this might be... Well, you might disagree with this, but I think these guys deserve place only in bad or don't make tier. Let's put them here. Yeah. So at least I would take one unit of Principes over these guys in my army. And once again save that almost 5,000 denarii from building the tier 4 barracks. That's the requirement for these. So if they were a bit better in melee against other infantry, then that would clearly improve them, but as they are, they just are not good enough in battle to justify any better place. And then let's move to missile units. Then we have first, well, Romans have kind of their own siege units, and pretty much other factions have their own, and we have Ballista here. And, well, I have said it many times, I don't like artillery units. They slow the army speed in campaign map. I don't see much use of them in battles. So, well, perhaps if you want to be sniping elephants or heavy cavalry, they might have some uses, but they are quite slow. Their firing rate is slow, so, yeah, I think you shouldn't make these guys. Then we have heavy peltasts. This is kind of interesting unit because it's almost like light infantry. Rather weak light infantry, but light infantry nonetheless, that has javelins. And those javelins do hurt, but at the same time other factions at this time have long-range archers. And it's almost like bringing a knife to gunfight to bring these guys facing enemy archers. So, well, yeah. Also, Greek cities have archers, so they might have their use, but personally I like the longer the range of the missile units in the campaign, the more I like it. So because of that, I think these guys deserve place only in the bad tier. But of course, after they have thrown their javelins, you can use them somewhat as a backup infantry. Then again, Greek cities have armored hoplites, so they don't quite have any need for backup infantry. So, yeah, I think they are just... From the fighting capabilities, they are decent, but regarding the overall Greek unit roster, I think they are bad in that department. Then we have onagers. Yeah. What I said about artillery applies to this unit as well. On the other hand, if there is one siege unit I like, it's onagers, because they can inflict some rather nice damage against enemy walls, enemy towers, tightly packed enemy formations such as phalanxes and so on. So, yeah, I don't like to make them, but if I had to make some artillery units, I think it would be onagers. Then we have Pharaoh's bowmen, clearly one of the best missile units in the game, or at least infantry missile units in the game. So they clearly deserve a place in A tier. Of course, they are hurt by the 2-turn training time, but for Egypt, I think this is, alongside with chariot archers, one of the key units for their armies for successful campaign. So clearly these are wannabe Spartans. Then we have Roman siege weapons. I think, well, pretty much the same applies to these as the other siege weapons. At the same time, the crew is a bit better than the comparing crew of other factions, so they can fight a bit better. For instance, if one pits, for instance, Armenian onager against one Eastern infantry, the Eastern infantry will win. But if one pits one Roman onager against an Eastern infantry, the Roman onager will most likely win. Mainly because the crew is much better at fighting. And I think the same goes for ballistas and scorpions too. So, this is my view about the best tier 4 units in Rome Total War. Do you agree or disagree? Did I miss something? Do I have something too much? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment field below. And you can also comment otherwise the video as well. For instance, you can propose new tier lists, which to make, and so on. If you liked the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Have a great rest of the day. Quality Old Games out.